He found a shivering alien girl in the trash, but she was hiding a royal secret. The night was cold and quiet. Rain fell gently on the rooftops of the small Earth town. Most people were asleep, but one man, Harlan, stayed awake. He was fixing an old machine inside his small workshop. Sparks flew as he worked. He wiped sweat from his forehead and sighed. Just then he heard something. A soft noise. Like a whimper. Like someone crying. Harlan froze. He listened again. The sound came from behind his workshop. He picked up a flashlight and slowly walked outside. The rain hit his shoulders as he moved toward the back alley. The crying got louder. A weak, shaky voice. It wasn't human. Harlan reached the trash bins and pointed his light. That's when he saw her. A small girl, shivering, wet, skin light blue, glowing softly. Her eyes, big, silver, and full of fear, stared at him like he was a monster. She looked no older than 10, but she was clearly not from Earth. Her arms were skinny, almost too thin. Her clothes were torn, just a gray cloth wrapped around her. She held something tight in her hand, a small broken pendant with strange symbols on it. Harlan knelt down slowly, trying not to scare her. "It's okay," he said gently. "I won't hurt you." The girl didn't speak. She pulled back, shaking harder. Her lips were purple from the cold. Harlan looked around. No one was there. No ship. No guardian. No signs of where she came from. He took off his jacket and held it out. "Come on, little one. Let's get you warm." She hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached out her hand. The moment her fingers touched the jacket, he felt it. A strange energy, like static, but gentle. He wrapped her in the coat and lifted her carefully. "You're freezing," he whispered. "Let's go inside." Inside the workshop, Harlan dried her off, gave her a blanket, and made some warm soup. She sat quietly on the floor, watching him with wide, scared eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked down. After a long pause, she said softly, "Elira." Her voice was like a whisper. "That's a beautiful name." Harlan smiled. "I'm Harlan." She just stared at the soup. He gently pushed the bowl toward her. "Eat. It's okay." Elira slowly brought the spoon to her lips. She took a small sip, then another. Then suddenly, she ate fast, like she hadn't eaten in days. Harlan's heart broke a little. What had happened to her? Later that night, she fell asleep on the old couch, curled up, still holding the broken pendant. Harlan sat at his desk and stared at her. Where did she come from? Who left her here? Why was she all alone? He picked up the pendant she had dropped on the table. It was old, gold like metal, but not from Earth. The symbols were glowing faintly, circular marks with a triangle in the center. Strange language. He touched it, and it shocked him lightly. He pulled back. "Definitely not human," he whispered. He placed it back near her. Hours passed. In the middle of the night, Elira started crying in her sleep. She twisted and mumbled words in a strange language. "No, please, Mother." Harlan rushed to her side. Hey. It's okay," he said, gently waking her up. She opened her eyes, breathing hard. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "You're safe here," he whispered. She looked at him for a long moment. Then, she slowly leaned forward and hugged him. Harlan didn't move. Then, he gently put his arms around her. "I got you," he whispered. The next morning, Harlan was making breakfast when Elira picked up a stick from the workshop floor. She bent down and began drawing on the concrete. At first, it looked like a circle, then 2 wings, a star in the middle. Harlan watched her. "What's that?" he asked. Elira didn't speak. She finished the drawing. Then, it began to glow, a faint golden light. Harlan stepped back, shocked. "What in the stars?" Elira looked up at him, her voice calm this time. "My mother said, if I ever get lost, Draw this. It will protect me. Protect you from what? The ones who killed her. Harlan stared at the glowing mark. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a royal crest. His hand shook as he looked at the girl. Who was she really? She wasn't just lost. She was being hunted. And she was no ordinary girl. She was a princess. Strange men start asking about the girl. He realizes she's being hunted. The morning sun rose quietly over the small town. The rain was gone, but the air was still cold and wet. Birds chirped on wires. Everything looked peaceful. But inside Harlan's workshop, the air felt heavy. He stood by the door, watching Alira as she carefully traced her glowing royal symbol again. Her little fingers moved slowly, like she was remembering something important, something sacred. Harlan rubbed his face. He hadn't slept much. What had he brought into his life? A girl from another world. Alone. Hunted. A princess. He didn't understand alien politics. He barely understood Earth politics. But something deep inside told him, if someone found her, they would try to take her or kill her. He couldn't let that happen. A knock at the door. That afternoon, as Harlan fixed a small hoverbike in front of the shop, a black vehicle parked across the street. It looked too clean, too official. Two men stepped out. Both wore long gray coats. Their faces were smooth, eyes cold. One was tall and thin. The other was shorter, but built like a soldier. They walked toward him with purpose. "Mr. Harlan," the tall one asked. Harlan wiped his hands. "That's me." The man showed a shiny silver badge, but it didn't say anything in English, just strange symbols. "We are with the Intergalactic Orphan Protection Unit. We're looking for a child." "Oh, refugee." Harlan kept his face calm. "I don't know anything about that." The short man stepped forward. "There was a crash near this town 3 nights ago. A small pod. We believe a survivor may be hiding here. A girl." "I fix machines," Harlan said. "Not aliens." The tall one looked past him toward the workshop door. "May we come in and look around?" Harlan shook his head. "You got a warrant from Earth Council." The short one frowned. "No." "Then no," Harlan said. The men looked at each other. The tall one smiled politely. "If you hear anything, let us know. For her safety, of course." They turned and walked back to their vehicle. But before leaving, the short man looked over his shoulder and said coldly, "Be careful who you protect, Mr. Harlan. Some things are better left in space." Then they drove off. They were not here to help. Harlan locked the door, then rushed to the back room where Alira was sitting on the floor, quietly fixing an old radio. She looked up at him. "They came, didn't they?" Harlan nodded. "You saw." She pointed to a small screen behind her ear. It blinked once, then turned off. "I saw their faces through the window," she said. "They're not from any protection unit." "Who are they?" he asked. Alira looked down. Her voice was soft. "They work for my uncle." Harlan sat down beside her. "Why are they chasing you?" "My mother was queen," she said. "She ruled Aloria. My uncle was her brother. He wanted the throne, but I was born first." Harlan blinked. "So, you're the next ruler?" She nodded slowly. "My mother died in a fire. They said it was an accident, but I saw my uncle push the firestone into her chamber. He smiled as he did it. Her hands shook. They said I died too, but my nurse helped me escape in a small pod. She told me to hide and never trust anyone." Harlan listened in silence. The room felt colder now. "I trusted you," Alira whispered. Harlan looked at her. She was just a child, but the pain in her eyes was ancient. "You're safe here," he said. "I promise." Preparing for trouble. That night, Harlan began making changes. He installed scanners around the building, traps, cameras. He reprogrammed an old delivery bot to act as a guard. Alira helped. She was smart, smarter than most adults. She knew how to bypass security chips, how to scan frequencies, and even how to read Harlan's repair manuals in less than a minute. "You're not just a princess," Harlan said. "You're a genius." Elira smiled shyly. "My mother said learning was a weapon. The only weapon that never runs out." Harlan grinned. "I like your mother already." Trouble comes at night. 3 nights later, it happened. A silent drone flew over the workshop. Harlan's scanners beeped loudly. He jumped from bed and rushed to the control panel. "Unidentified scanner near Sector 3. The bot yelled. Harlan looked at the screen. One black drone hovered above, scanning the house. He ran to Elira's room, but she was already gone. "Elira, I'm on the roof," her voice said through the intercom. "I'm handling it." "Wait, what?" He ran outside just in time to see her standing on the rooftop. Her hair blew in the wind. The glowing symbol on her chest shined brightly. The drone spotted her. It charged a red beam. She raised her hand, and the light exploded in her palm. The drone fired. But the beam never touched her. Her body glowed, and a shield appeared in the air. The blast bounced off like it hit a mirror. Elira raised her other hand and clenched her fist. The drone twisted in the air and crushed itself like a tin can. Then it fell to the ground with a loud crash. Harlan stood frozen. Elira climbed down, breathing hard. "I'm tired of hiding," she said. A message left behind. The next morning, Harlan checked the drone's remains. Inside, he found something strange. A recorded message, still active. It was her uncle's voice. "If anyone is helping the girl, they will face death. Bring her to me, or Earth will know pain." Harlan stared at the screen. Elira watched him quietly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to bring war to your home." "You didn't," Harlan said. He looked into her eyes. "You brought something else." "What?" "Family." That evening, Elira sat near the window, watching the stars. Her pendant now glowed softly again. She turned to Harlan. "I want to tell you everything. I want you to know who I am. Everything I remember." "I'm listening," he said, sitting beside her. She held out the pendant and pressed the side. A small hologram appeared, showing a tall, elegant woman with the same silver eyes. Her mother. The hologram spoke in a soft voice. "If you're seeing this, it means I'm gone, and you're not safe. But you must find the one who sees your worth, not your title. He will help you rise again. Trust him." Harlan looked at Elira. She looked back at him. She had found the one. She starts calling him father, and it changes something deep inside him. It had been 2 weeks since Harlan found the strange alien girl in the alley behind his workshop. 2 weeks since he offered her food, warmth, and safety, without knowing she was a princess, hunted by her own blood. But in these 2 weeks, something had changed inside the old mechanic, and inside the girl too. She still had silver eyes, still had blue skin, still held the glowing royal pendant close to her chest every night. But now she smiled more. She laughed quietly when Harlan burned the toast. She helped sort out his tools and even learned how to fix hoverbikes faster than most adults. And she no longer flinched when he raised his voice in frustration. She trusted him, but nothing hit him harder than what happened that rainy morning. "Good morning, Father." The rain returned, soft and slow. Harlan was pouring himself some cheap black coffee when Elira walked in, wearing an oversized shirt and dragging her small blanket. Her hair was messy. She rubbed her eyes, yawned, and smiled sleepily. "Good morning, Father." Harlan froze. The cup in his hand trembled slightly. What did you say?" he asked, turning toward her. Elira blinked, confused. "Father, isn't that what I call you?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "I read it in the Earth language books," she added, picking up a spoon. "A man who protects, feeds, and raises a child is called father." Harlan sat down slowly. His heart beat hard against his chest. Elira looked up, innocent. "You don't want me to call you that." He cleared his throat. His voice cracked. "No, I don't mind. I just wasn't ready." She smiled and sipped her juice. To her, it was a small thing. But to Harlan, it cracked something deep inside. A wall he didn't know was still standing. A broken past. That night, Harlan sat alone in the workshop. The lights were low. Outside, the wind howled softly. He stared at an old picture frame tucked inside a drawer. He hadn't looked at it in years. It showed a little human girl, his daughter, Elsie, smiling with missing teeth, holding a wrench too big for her hands. She died 10 years ago. A car crash. Drunk driver. Gone in seconds. After that, Harlan stopped talking to people, stopped believing in anything. He never thought he'd care for a child again. Until now. Until Elira. She was not human, not even from this planet. But when she called him father, it felt real. A new life begins. Over the next days, their bond deepened. Harlan fixed up a small room just for her, painted it soft purple, added glow stickers of stars and moons. He even built a bed shaped like a small spaceship. Elira jumped on it like a kid at a festival. Her laugh echoed through the walls. She began wearing clothes from local shops, hoodies, jeans, colorful socks. She said Earth fashion was funny and soft. Harlan taught her how to cook Earth food. She taught him how to read ancient Aelorian writing. They became more than just protector and refugee. They became family. Trouble at the market. One sunny morning, Harlan took Elira to the local market. She wore a hat and scarf to hide her skin, and he warned her not to talk too much in public. But as they walked past fruit stalls and hoverbike parts, 3 teenage boys spotted her. One of them shouted, "Hey, what's with the blue freak?" Elira froze. Another boy laughed. "Is she sick? Why's her skin glowing?" Harlan stepped in front of her. "Keep walking," he growled. The boys snickered. "You protecting aliens now, old man." Harlan stepped forward. "I said, walk." Something in his voice made them back off. They muttered insults and left. Elira's eyes were wide. She had seen many kinds of danger. Soldiers, drones, assassins. But never this kind, never hatred for being different. Harlan put a hand on her shoulder. "They don't understand. But I do." Elira looked up. "Thank you, Father." He nodded. "Always. The pendant reacts." That night, while Elira slept, the royal pendant began to glow again. Harlan heard the hum and walked into her room. The pendant floated slightly above her chest. A beam of light shot upward, creating a 3D map in the air. It showed planets, star paths, symbols. Harlan recognized Earth and Eloria, her homeworld. Lines connected them. Symbols blinked near Eloria. Danger. War. Then, the image zoomed into a palace. A throne. A woman sat on it. Tall, proud, with glowing blue robes. Her face was kind. It was her mother. Then a man entered the throne room. Harsh face. Cold eyes. He raised a red stone. The vision flashed red, and the woman fell. The vision ended. The pendant dropped softly onto Elira's chest. She woke up and saw Harlan. "You saw it," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "That was your mother." She nodded. "And the man was my uncle." Harlan sat beside her. "The throne should be yours." "I don't care about the throne," she said quietly. "I just want my people to be free. And safe." She looked at him. "Like you made me feel." "Something is coming." The next morning, Harlan heard a strange beeping sound from the scanner near the roof. He rushed to check it. A red dot was blinking on the edge of the town. Not a drone this time. A ship, small, fast, silent, cloaked, heading straight toward them. He ran back to Elira's room. "Pack your things. Now." She sat up. "Is it them?" "I don't know. but I'm not waiting to find out. They grabbed emergency supplies, tools, and clothes. As they headed for the garage, Alira stopped and looked around. This place was the first home I ever knew. Harlan paused. You'll have a better one someday. She took his hand. I already do. They jumped into his dusty hover truck and drove out of town, disappearing into the night. Behind them, the ship landed silently. Two tall figures stepped out, cloaked in shadows. One of them touched the ground. She was here, the figure hissed. And the Earthling too. The other pulled out a strange weapon and smiled. Let's smoke them out. Her enemies arrive on Earth, but she refuses to run. Smoke rose from the edge of the forest as a dark alien ship hovered just above the trees. Its silent engines hummed like an angry storm. Inside the vehicle, two cloaked figures reviewed a map glowing red with heat signatures. She was here, one of them said. His voice was sharp, like ice slicing through air. She's moving, but not far. The Earthling helps her. The other, taller one pulled down his hood. His skin was pale gray, marked with thin silver scars. His eyes glowed red. Soon, he said coldly, we dragged the little princess back in chains. They activated a tracker and began moving. The hunt was now official. A safe house, but not for long. Harlan's hover truck sped through old, forgotten roads deep in the countryside. Trees blurred past them like ghosts in the mist. The skies turned purple as dusk arrived. Alira sat quietly in the back, holding her pendant close. Her eyes were wide open, but filled with more fire than fear now. They stopped at a remote shed in the woods. It was an old smuggler's hideout Harlan used years ago, back when he ran gray market parts for survival. He led Alira inside. It's not much, he said, but it'll keep us hidden. Alira walked around slowly. The air smelled of oil and dust, but it was dry. Quiet. Safe, for now. She placed her pendant on a stone table and sat. I can feel them, she whispered. They're close. Harlan turned to her. How? She pointed to her heart. My blood. The royal line has a connection. I feel when someone carries the same blood, especially when their heart is full of hate. I'm tired of running. That night, Harlan sharpened old tools. He wasn't a soldier, but he could build traps, jam signals, and wire explosions if needed. Alira stood in the doorway, her shadow long and silent. I don't want to run anymore, she said softly. Harlan looked up. You think I do? She stepped closer. You've done more for me than anyone. You've given me food, safety, hope. But now, I must give something back. Her voice shifted, more firm. Royal, I will not let you risk your life alone. I will face them. You're just a kid. I'm also the firstborn heir of Eloria, she said. And I am not afraid. Harlan stared at her. She looked taller somehow, stronger, braver. He didn't argue. Instead, he smiled. Then we do this together. Training with the Earthling. Over the next 2 days, Harlan trained her. Not to kill, but to survive. He taught her how to spot weak spots in armor, how to use basic explosives, how to turn scrap into distraction tools. In return, Alira showed him her growing powers. Her hands could create protective fields. Her eyes could track movement through walls. The pendant could store small energy pulses and release them like mini-storms. At night, they practiced in silence. 2 figures under the stars. 1 human, 1 royal alien, but both bound by something stronger than blood. The first attack. On the 3rd night, it happened. A loud boom shattered the trees outside the shed. Harlan jumped up. Alira was already standing, her hands glowing faintly. The door exploded off its hinges. Smoke and ash filled the air. Through the smoke walked 2 tall soldiers in black armor with red symbols. They raised their weapons. Harlan activated a smoke trap. The room filled with thick white fog. Lasers flew. Alira ducked, rolled, and pushed her hands forward. creating a pulse that knocked one attacker through the wall. Harlan tackled the other and jammed a spike into his armor, shorting out his suit. Elira stood over the one outside. "Tell my uncle," she said, "I'm not his pawn anymore." Then she raised her hand, and the ground beneath the soldier cracked with blue fire. He scrambled away, disappearing into the trees. Aftermath. The shed was ruined. Harlan had cuts on his arm. Elira's hands trembled, not from fear, but from too much power flowing through her too fast. She collapsed. Harlan caught her and carried her to the back of the truck. "You were amazing," he whispered, "but we can't stay here." She looked at him with weak eyes. "Then we go to them. We take the fight back." "To Eloria." She nodded. "I'll show you what my mother taught me, and I'll show them who I've become." Harlan touched her forehead. "Then we're going home." A final decision. They traveled across the country to an old space yard Harlan once worked at. It was mostly abandoned now, but deep underground, behind broken hangars, lay something hidden. A half-repaired stealth ship. Harlan had been fixing it piece by piece for years, always thinking he'd sell it someday. Now he knew why he kept it. It wasn't for selling. It was for her. As they loaded supplies and charged the systems, Elira walked up to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to come with me," she said. Harlan turned. "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because I'm your father now. And fathers don't run either." She didn't speak. She just hugged him, tight. And this time she cried, but not from fear. From love. As the ship launched quietly into the stars, Earth faded behind them. Ahead lay a broken planet, a palace in ruins, a throne stolen by betrayal, but also hope. In the darkness of space, Elira stood beside Harlan in the cockpit. She wore a small crown on her head, made from parts he found in the shed. Simple, silver, beautiful. He looked at her. "You sure you're ready?" She smiled. "No, but I'm going anyway." Harlan grinned. "That's my girl." Far behind them, the red-eyed enemy stood watching the stars. "She's returning," he whispered to the shadows. "She dares come back." He turned to his soldier. "Prepare the armies. The little princess wants a war. She'll get one." She takes him to her home planet. But it's not what he expected. The stars glowed cold as the stolen ship cut through space. Inside, silence hung heavy. Not the silence of peace, but of two souls preparing for a homecoming filled with ghosts. Harlan sat in the pilot's seat, his fingers wrapped tightly around the controls. His heart pounded, but he showed no fear. Not in front of her. Beside him stood Elira, her silver eyes fixed on the dark blue planet ahead. Eloria, her home. The place where her mother died. The place where her people were betrayed. Her lips moved silently, whispering words from her mother's language. A prayer. A vow. Harlan glanced at her. "Are you okay?" Elira didn't answer for a moment. Then, "I'm not afraid of the planet," she said. "I'm afraid of what I'll find on it." Harlan nodded. "Whatever we find, you won't face it alone." Landing in the ruins, the ship pierced Eloria's thick clouds and descended through a sky the color of morning. Black ash floated like snow. Once green forests were now gray wastelands. As they neared the palace ruins, the silence broke. The sensors picked up movement, weak life signs scattered through the land. They landed in what used to be the royal garden. But now, vines choked the once beautiful flowers. Statues were broken. The air smelled of dust and forgotten dreams. Elira stepped out first. Her feet touched her home soil for the first time since she was a child. She looked around, her face unreadable. Harlan followed, hand on his blaster. "This place, it's like a graveyard." Elira walked slowly, touching a fallen tree. "This garden was once filled with singing birds and light-glass trees. My mother would walk with me here every morning." A single tear ran down her cheek. Then a sound. Rustling. Harlan raised his weapon. From behind a broken wall, a child peeked out. Thin, pale, eyes wide. Then another, then a woman. An old man. One by one, dozens of survivors stepped into the open. Elira gasped. They were her people. Starving, hiding, silent. Until one whispered, "It's her." Another fell to his knees. "The princess has returned." A voice from the past. The crowd gathered, unsure, scared to hope. Then, an old alien woman stepped forward. Her back was bent, her hair white as moonlight. Elira's eyes lit up. "Nara." The old woman cried out and rushed forward, wrapping her arms around the girl. "My little flame," she sobbed. "They said you were dead. I watched your mother's chambers burn. I thought I lost you." Elira held her tightly. "You were the one who helped me escape." Nara nodded. "Your mother made me promise to save you. She knew the court was full of vipers." They held each other like time had never passed. Harlan stood quietly, moved by the scene. But then Nara's face turned serious. "You must not stay here. The Shadow Guard will return." "I didn't come to hide," Elira said. "I came to reclaim what was stolen." Rebellion sparks. That evening, in a secret chamber beneath the palace ruins, the survivors gathered. There, by candlelight and soft whispers, Elira stood before her people, not as a scared child, but as a future queen. "I was hidden on earth," she began, "but my heart stayed here. I have seen what my uncle has done. I have felt your pain, and I will not run again." She paused. "This man," she pointed to Harlan, "took me in when I was no one. He gave me a home, taught me to fight. He is not just my protector. He is my father." Gasps echoed in the chamber. "He stands with me. And if you still believe in the House of Lirai, then rise." For a moment, silence. Then Nara stepped forward, knelt, and bowed her head. "I pledge my life." One by one, others followed. Dozens knelt. The old symbol of the royal house was drawn in light again on the chamber floor. It glowed blue with power. The rebellion had begun, fixing what was broken. Over the next days, Harlan and Elira worked with the people to restore power to hidden safe houses. Harlan repaired old defense drones, trained the younger ones in basic combat, and taught sabotage. Elira helped sick children, listened to old stories, and sat with wounded elders. She was no longer just a symbol. She became a leader. But they needed more. Nara spoke of the core crystal, hidden deep beneath the palace, sealed long ago. It could power the shields that once protected Eloria, but only a royal bloodline could awaken it. Elira and Harlan ventured into the underground chambers. The path was long, full of traps and crumbled stairways. At the heart of the ruins, they found it, a massive glowing crystal inside a glass vault. Elira stepped forward, placed her hand on the glass, and whispered in her native tongue, "By blood and spirit, I awaken thee." The crystal lit up. Lights flickered to life across the chamber. A soft hum spread through the walls. The palace was breathing again. The enemy responds. From his black throne in the new capital, Lord Melkor, her uncle, watched the energy spikes across Eloria. He clenched his fist. "She dares return. That little brat." A soldier entered. "The people are whispering, my lord. They say, the true heir walks again." Melkor snarled. "Then it's time they see what I do to ghosts." He turned to his army. "Prepare the execution ships. We end this rebellion before it burns." That night, Elira stood at the highest tower of the palace. The wind blew her white cape as the stars lit the sky. Harlan joined her, holding 2 mugs of hot spiced tea. He handed her one. "You've come a long way." "So have you," she smiled. He looked at her with pride. "Whatever happens, I'm here." She looked at him with tearful eyes. "You gave me a second life. Father, I will never forget that." In the distance, Red lights appeared in the sky. Enemy ships, dozens of them, coming fast. Elira raised her head. Let them come. He offers himself to save her people, but she makes a different choice. The red enemy ships broke through Eloria's dusty skies like angry fireballs. Their engines roared low and deadly. The ground shook as black steel drop pods crashed into hills, burned fields, and shattered the ruins near the once royal palace. Inside the newly reawakened control chamber beneath the palace, the air was tense. Elira stood at the front. Her eyes scanned the holomap showing the invasion points. Her people waited silently for her words. Men, women, elders, teens, all carried some form of weapon. All had fear in their eyes, but also something stronger. Hope. She turned to them. Her voice was clear and strong. They come with numbers. They come with weapons, but they don't come with truth. That's our weapon, and it's stronger than anything they carry. Her voice echoed off the stone walls. I will not kneel. I will not run. If this is my last day, then I will spend it fighting for my people, not hiding from my blood. The crowd responded, not with cheers, but with something better. Conviction. Harlan's plan. In a nearby corridor, Harlan was going over an old transmission jammer. He was sweating, not from the heat, but from what he was about to do. Nera entered, watching him with wise, knowing eyes. You're thinking of doing something foolish, she said gently. Harlan nodded. That's usually when I do my best work. She stepped closer. You're not just her protector now. You're her heart. If something happens to you, he looked at her. If something happens to her, this entire planet dies in spirit, not just in battle. Nera sighed. She trusts you more than anyone. She deserves to live, even if I don't. And with that, he picked up the small device and left. The ultimatum. Hours later, the enemy sent a message. A giant hologram appeared above the ruins, visible to all. Lord Melkor, dressed in royal armor, seated on a dark throne. He spoke in a voice full of venom. Elira of House Lurai, you live. Somehow. His tone twisted into mocking laughter. You return from the dead, waving old symbols like they still matter. You inspire rats to crawl from the cracks. Fine. His face hardened. You have 1 hour. Surrender yourself, or watch this city burn. The message ended. People began to panic. Elira stood still, silent. Then Harlan stepped forward. I have a better idea. A father's sacrifice. Harlan stood on top of the tower wall as a drone floated before him, recording his image. He spoke calmly. My name is Harlan Vex. I am not from Eloria. I am from Earth, and I have something your coward of a lord wants. He held up a small silver orb. A bio-coded detonator linked to your invasion ships. You blow up this city. You blow up yourself. In truth, it was a bluff. The detonator was fake, just old junk metal connected to a transmitter. But the confidence in his voice made it feel real. I offer you this. You want her. Take me instead. The crowd gasped. She's not your threat. I am. The longer she lives, the more people rise. But I'm just a man. The drone zoomed in. Harlan looked straight into it. You want someone to break. I'm easier to break than her. Elira's rage. Inside the palace, Elira threw the screen to the ground. Why would he do that? She paced the floor like a storm. Nera tried to calm her. He's protecting you. Like always. He's sacrificing himself. Like always. She slammed her fist into the wall. A crack formed in the stone. I won't let him die for me. Not again. Not anyone. Prisoner of the enemy. Harlan was taken quickly. They dragged him into a steel pod, chained his arms, and placed him before Lord Melkor. The throne room was cold, full of shadows. Melkor stood, eyes scanning Harlan like a puzzle piece that didn't belong. A human, he sneered. This is who delayed my rule. This is who raised the girl. Harlan didn't flinch. I didn't raise her. She raised me. Malcor slapped him hard across the face. I want the pendant, Malcor growled. I want the throne key. Where is it? Harlan smiled through bloodied lips. Probably with the person smart enough to use it. Malcor stepped back. Torture him. Slowly. But just then, alarms blared. A new signal had entered the capital. One that no one expected. The princess strikes back. Outside the enemy fortress, a flying transport dropped low. From it, a figure stepped out, her cloak glowing with the royal crest. Elira. But she wasn't alone. Behind her marched farmers, hunters, mechanics, even children, all armored with scrap and purpose, all ready to fight. As she walked forward, her voice boomed across the land, amplified by her pendant. People of Eloria, hear me. Today, I do not kneel. Not to fear, not to family, not to traitors. I was a child when they tried to bury me. I am no longer a child. I am Elira Vexlira, daughter of the rightful queen, and heir to the throne. And I am not alone. Rebellion awakens. Inside the capital, workers paused. Soldiers hesitated. Old supporters who had once served her mother felt fire return to their hearts. Some dropped their weapons. Others joined the fight. Chaos broke out. Elira stormed the gates. Inside, Malcor panicked. Find the girl. Kill the human. But it was too late. Face to face. In the throne room, Elira stood before her uncle. Harlan, weak and bloody, was on his knees beside the throne. Let him go, she commanded. Malcor laughed. You think power belongs to whoever wears a crown. No, she said, stepping closer. Power belongs to those who serve. She raised her hands, energy glowing, humming with light. Malcor drew a blade of black plasma. Then let's see how long you survive. They fought. Hard. Fast. Power clashed against raw rage. Elira was knocked down once, but stood again. Harlan crawled to the edge of the room, yelling, You got this, kid. She smiled. And then, she used not just her power, but her heart. She disarmed her uncle without killing him. Dropped her blade, faced him barehanded. You lost the day you stopped loving this planet. Malcor roared, but his soldiers didn't move. No one came to his aid. He stood alone. And then, he fell to his knees. Elira could have ended him. But instead she turned. To the people of Eloria, he is no longer your ruler. He is no longer mine. Let him live, so he sees everything rebuilt without him. The people cheered. The palace lit up. Harlan smiled weakly. And Elira knelt beside him, held his face, and whispered, You don't have to die for me anymore. He coughed a laugh. Good. I'm tired of being dramatic. They both laughed. She becomes queen, but refuses the crown without her father. Eloria was no longer silent. The air buzzed with life as sunlight broke through the smoky sky. Birds that had once fled now returned. Broken towers stood tall again, patched with new stone and strong hands. The war was over. Lord Malcor was captured. His soldiers had surrendered. The rebellion had not only survived, it had won. But in the great throne room, still cracked by battle, one question remained. Who would leave Eloria now? The morning after the war, Harlan woke up in a soft bed inside a bright chamber. The ceilings were high, painted with stars and silver vines. The walls hummed gently with energy. His bandaged arm ached, but it wasn't pain he focused on. It was the silence. Peaceful. Not the silence of hiding, but of safety. The door opened. Elira walked in, dressed in a clean white robe. A silver crest rested on her shoulder. She smiled. You're awake. Harlan sat up slowly. Where am I? The royal chamber, she said. And you snore. He chuckled. Guess I deserved a soft bed after getting punched in the face by a general. She sat beside him and held his hand. The people want me to take the throne, she said quietly. They've been waiting. Harlan looked at her. And what do you want? Elira didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, I want not to be alone. The ceremony begins. That afternoon, the palace filled with people. From all over the planet, survivors gathered in the grand hall. They wore robes, armor, old festival clothes, whatever they could find that still held meaning. They filled every corner, even the staircases. At the front stood the royal seat, the throne. An elder read from the Book of Crowns, his voice echoing in the chamber. By the laws of Eloria, only one with true royal blood, who has faced fire and darkness, who carries both crown and courage, may rise. The crowd turned as Elira entered. She wore silver armor polished bright. A long white cape trailed behind her. On her chest, the family crest glowed softly. But her hands were empty. No crown, no staff, no sword. She walked slowly to the throne, then turned around to face the people. She raised her voice. A new kind of queen. I stand here not because of my blood, she began, but because of you. You fought beside me. You healed. You believed. I am not the child they buried. I am not the ghost they feared. I am Elira Vexlira, daughter of fire, raised by earth, and I will not take the throne. The crowd gasped. She raised her hand to quiet them. Unless my father stands beside me. She looked toward the back of the room. Harlan stood there, in his dusty jacket, still holding a bandage on his side. All eyes turned to him. He tried to back away, but Elira's voice came again, this time, softer. You taught me how to be brave, how to lead, how to laugh again. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You are my father, not by blood, by choice, and that bond is stronger. She stepped off the platform, walked through the crowd, and held out her hand. Come stand beside your daughter, the earthling at the throne. Harlan swallowed hard. He had been in wars. He had seen cities burn, lovers betray, machines explode. But nothing shook him like this moment. He slowly took her hand and followed her to the platform. Together, they stood before the throne. And then the people, all of them, bowed, not just to Elira, but to the man from Earth who had saved their princess, the crown forged from two worlds. Nera stepped forward, holding a crown unlike any in Elorian history. It was made from two metals, the old silver of Eloria and earth steel. At the center was a star-shaped crystal that once powered Harlan's stolen ship. It glowed softly. Elira knelt. But before Nera could place the crown, Elira turned to Harlan. I won't kneel alone, she whispered. Harlan blinked. Me. You helped me rise. You deserve to rise too. He hesitated. Then slowly he knelt beside her. Together, they bowed their heads. Nera placed the crown on Elira, then placed a silver ring on Harlan's finger. By the will of the people, she said, let this day be remembered. The day the lost princess returned, and brought with her the man who reminded us how to hope. Years later, 5 years passed. Eloria changed. The skies were clean. The palace was rebuilt. Trade with Earth had opened. Children no longer hid in ruins. They flew kites over green fields. At the edge of the palace garden, Harlan sat on a bench, drinking tea. His hair was grayer, but his eyes were peaceful. Behind him, 2 little Elorian children, blue-skinned, silver-eyed twins, ran in circles chasing light bugs. Elira stood nearby, now wearing a flowing cape and light armor. She carried a small datapad and gave orders to guards politely but firmly. She had become more than queen. She had become legend. She walked over to Harlan. They'd got your stubbornness, you know. She smiled, nodding to the kids. He laughed. They'd got your fire. Elira sat beside him. You ever regret it? She asked, taking in that crying girl in the alley. He looked at her. I didn't find a girl in the trash, Alara, he said softly. I found a star that had fallen. And somehow, that star saved me too. They sat in silence, watching the children laugh. One more message. Later that evening, Alara returned to her private chamber. She opened the pendant that still hung around her neck. It glowed and hummed. A recording of her mother flickered to life again. If you're seeing this, her mother said, then you've returned. I knew you would. I prayed the stars would send someone kind to guide you. You were never meant to rule alone. The message faded. Alara whispered to the stars above, don't worry, Mother. I found him. And far across the galaxy, on a quiet planet called Earth, a new star lit the sky.